System 1. The first click. Before 1984, computers were scary boxes where you had to type hacker codes just to see a single folder. Steve Jobs wanted it so easy a goldfish could do it, so he gave us the mouse and icons. This was System 1, the great-grandfather of your laptop. Before this, computers were just black screens with green text where you had to type complex commands. Jobs changed the game by introducing a graphical user interface, meaning you could point and click instead of memorizing boring command prompts. The coolest part? The entire operating system was so small, it fit on a single 400 KB floppy disk. For comparison, one high-quality photo today is way bigger than that whole system. However, System 1 had some old man problems. It could only run one program at a time. If you were writing a report and wanted to open a calculator, you had to close the report first. Talk about annoying! Also, there was no trash can yet. If you deleted a file, it was gone forever. Poof! Vanished into the digital abyss. Plus, the computer only had 128 KB of RAM, which made it slower than a turtle walking through peanut butter. Even with those hiccups, it laid the foundation for every Mac you've ever touched. System 7. The multitasking master. By 1991, users were tired of only doing one thing at a time. Enter System 7, the update that finally let people multitask. This was a huge deal. For the first time, you could run several applications at the same time without the computer having a total meltdown. It also finally gave us the trash can feature. Now, if you deleted your homework by mistake, it stayed in the bin until you emptied it. It was like a second chance button for your files. System 7 also introduced file sharing over networks, so offices and schools could send documents back and forth easily. But don't get too excited, it wasn't all sunshine and rainbows. System 7 was heavy software, meaning it needed a lot of power to run smoothly. If you tried to put it on an older Mac, it felt incredibly sluggish and would crash or freeze if you opened too many things at once. It also introduced colored icons and fancy fonts, making documents look way more professional than the old black and white days. Even though it was sometimes as cranky as a toddler who missed a nap, System 7 stayed popular for years because it finally let people do more than one thing at a time. macOS 9, the final classic. Released in 1999, macOS 9 was the final version of the classic Mac era. Apple was trying to make their old software as fast and polished as possible before they started from scratch. They added a cool tool called Sherlock 2, which was basically a digital detective that helped you find files on your computer and search the internet. It also brought us Software Update, which meant the computer could finally talk to Apple to fix its own bugs. They even added voice recognition so you could talk to your computer. But underneath the fancy features, macOS 9 was like a house built on an old, shaky foundation. It lacked protected memory, which is a fancy way of saying that if one tiny app crashed, it would take the entire computer down with it. Imagine if one person in a choir sang the wrong note and suddenly everyone else's heads exploded. That was macOS 9. It was clear that the old way of building computers was hitting a wall. Apple knew they needed something totally new, or they'd be stuck in the past forever. This version was the last hurrah before the biggest change in Mac history. macOS 10 Cheetah, the candy-colored rebirth. In 2001, Apple threw the old rules out the window and released macOS 10 Cheetah. This wasn't just an update, it was a complete break from the past. It was built on a super strong foundation called Unix. The most famous part was the Aqua interface. Everything looked like a shiny, translucent piece of candy. The buttons were glossy, the windows were see-through, and the animations were buttery smooth. Because of its modern architecture, Cheetah had protected memory, so if an app crashed, the rest of your computer stayed perfectly fine. However, being the new kid was tough. Cheetah was extremely slow compared to macOS 9, especially on older computers. It was also missing some basic features we take for granted now, like being able to play a DVD or burn a CD. Imagine having a futuristic computer that couldn't even play a movie. Many professional users felt it was unfinished and buggy, like a cake that was taken out of the oven too early. But even with the rough start, Cheetah established the foundation for the modern macOS we know and love today. It was the first step into a much bigger, glossier world. macOS 10 Snow Leopard, the spring cleaning version. Usually, when a new computer update comes out, everyone wants to know about the flashy new features. But in 2009, Apple did something totally different with Snow Leopard. Instead of adding hundreds of new bells and whistles, they focused entirely on refinement, performance, and stability. It was basically a massive spring cleaning for your computer's brain. They cleaned up the code so well that it actually gave users back 7 GB of hard drive space. It's like cleaning your room and finding out your closet is twice as big as you thought. Snow Leopard was all about being fast and reliable. It introduced the Mac App Store, making it super easy to find and update apps in one place. It was so stable that some people refused to stop using it for years, even after newer versions came out. However, it did have one downside. It dropped support for older PowerPC Macs, meaning if your computer was too old, you were left behind in the dust. For everyone else though, Snow Leopard was considered one of the best versions ever because it just worked without any drama. It proved that being better is more important than being new. macOS Big Sur, the iPadification of the Mac. Big Sur arrived in 2020 and brought the biggest visual change in nearly 20 years. Apple decided the Mac should look more like an iPhone or iPad. They gave it rounded corners, colorful icons, and a control center for things like Wi-Fi and brightness. But the biggest news wasn't just the looks, it was the Apple Silicon support for M1 chips. Before this, Macs used chips from other companies. Now, Apple was making their own superbrains, bringing significant performance improvements and better battery life. But, as with most big things, there were some big headaches. When Big Sur first launched, many people had a nightmare of a time trying to install it, with some Macs even failing during updates. People with older Intel-based Macs noticed their computers felt slower and used more memory. Some users also complained that it looked too much like a phone and didn't feel like a real computer anymore. Despite the complaints and the bumpy start, Big Sur marked a brand new era for Apple Silicon. It showed that the future of Macs was basically going to be a giant, super powerful iPad with a keyboard attached. macOS Sequoia, the AI revolution. By 2024, everyone was talking about artificial intelligence, and Apple didn't want to be left behind. macOS Sequoia introduced Apple Intelligence, which is like having a tiny, super smart assistant living inside your screen. It brought smarter Siri responses, tools that help you rewrite your emails, and better photo organization. It also finally added improved window tiling, which lets you snap your windows into perfect grids so you don't have a messy, overlapping screen. Privacy was a huge focus here too. Sequoia gave users more control over which apps could see their data and improved Safari's ability to block trackers. It was also optimized to make apps launch lightning fast on Apple Silicon chips. Of course, critics had things to say. Some people felt the AI features were overhyped and didn't actually do as much as Apple promised. Others were frustrated because some of their older professional software stopped working. But overall, Sequoia represented Apple's effort to make your Mac smarter and faster so you can spend less time clicking and more time doing. It's basically the computer equivalent of having a genius friend who does your chores for you. macOS Tahoe. The future is glass. Finally, we reached the futuristic macOS Tahoe, released in September 2025. This version introduced the liquid glass design, making your screen look like it's made of actual transparent material that reflects light and color as you move. The menu bar even became virtually invisible, making your screen feel like one giant piece of glass. Tahoe also replaced Launchpad with a new applications interface that organizes apps by category, just like an iPhone. The coolest new trick? Deep iPhone integration. Tahoe introduced a dedicated phone app so you can make calls through your iPhone directly from your Mac with features like Hold Assist. You can even customize your folders with emojis and colors. But there's a catch. Tahoe is the final version to support older Macs with Intel chips. If you have an old Intel Mac, this is officially the end of the road. Some people also hated that the Launchpad was gone and thought the design was too phone-like. But whether you love it or hate it, Tahoe is Apple's way of saying the future is unified, see-through, and very, very fast. Now, don't forget to subscribe for My Poor Cat. See you in the next one.